interesting flying movement just coming in over the M11 on arrival. The UK's latest airworthy Mustang, an Australian-built example, produced by the Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation, and I believe this is only its second post-restoration flight. And what a beautiful specimen it is. Put back into the air by Air Leasing at Sywell, owned by Fighter Aviation Engineering, and this is the first chance to see it at a public event. Sorry we couldn't give you a few moments more warning of its arrival. I've only just found out myself, but you will get to see it close up as it taxis in. The aircraft is finished as a late war P-51D named Jersey Jerk, and you'll be able to see those markings on the aeroplane as it taxis in. That aircraft originally was the mount of Major Donald Strait when he was the commanding officer of the 356th Fighter Group's 361st Fighter Squadron, part of the US 8th Air Force, stationed at Martlesham Heath near Ipswich in 1944. Strait notched up a total of 122 combat sorties and became that fighter group's leading scorer, amassing 13.5 kills of enemy aircraft before the war was over. He flew P-47 Thunderbolts before he moved on to P-51s, and he christened them Jersey Jerk after the US state of New Jersey in which he grew up, and after he found that the name he wanted to give his aeroplanes, namely Jersey Bounce, had already been taken.
there you have it, the newest Mustang on the block, as far as the UK warbird scene is concerned. Jersey Jerk into Duxford for the first time. This aircraft was imported, towards the tail end of last year from Australia. Duxford shows as well as elsewhere around the circuit. I'm told it made maiden post reputation.
A very warm welcome everyone to IWM Duxford. Great to have you with us once again.
The sun's come out for us to mark the first of a very full flying season. What a fantastic day to begin things.
The new season begins with an old favourite. IWM Duxford's VE-themed Flying Day once again positions itself as the first British air show of the year. 3 Spitfires, 1 Hurricane, Wildcat, Nimrod, Fury and Electra are among the highlights at Plains TV's 2024 season opener.
Hello everybody, welcome to IWM Duxford. No audio from me, that's a bit of a shame. How about Adam, have you got any audio?
Have you got any audio for me? Oh, it was all going so well.
It was, wasn't it? That's a bit of a shame. Do you want to roll a
Cut to 2 and an interim or something.
Which is now left in shores.
Hello everyone.
Jersey Jerk will be available for passenger rides from Sidewell with the ultimate warbird flight stable, as well as operating
1, 2, 3.
You got good levels there, that's a bit of a shame.
Oh no, the camera's fine. The camera's getting them.
1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. Is it the same? Just test the camera. 1, 2, hello? Oh, I can hear myself.
Very nice to see the Mustang parked not far from the newly overhauled.
Hello everybody, good afternoon. Welcome to IWM Duxford. Excuse our little microphone fan. Who else? Levels here, getting roughly to a spot where you can hear us. So we've got about half an hour till the flying starts, and we're just tweaking some audio levels, make sure we're coming through loud and clear. So welcome everybody watching on YouTube, welcome everybody watching on the new streaming service. Quite excited about that, a new platform, new website that Adam and I have been working on over the last, 3 months? It's taken a little while, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So migrated that streaming service onto a new platform. And it's an exciting one. It gives you a much easier route to get Plains TV on your TV via Chromecast and AirPlay. So if you're watching on that service, you can of course do that, get us on the TV. And of course we're live on YouTube as well. Welcome everybody on YouTube. Saw some familiar names in the chat. I hope you've all had a lovely winter, and isn't it wonderful to be back out at an airshow, especially on a nice weather day like this?
Yeah, I didn't expect to be on the first show of the season wearing short sleeves, but it's a really nice warm day. I would say must be into the mid-20s, would you say?
Really?
Maybe not.
I think we're
Maybe
probably
not quite.
18, 19, but yeah, it's certainly a gorgeous day and light winds as well. Bit of an odd start for us, excuse all the messing about. Some new hardware, rehearsed a couple of times, the audio wasn't working quite as we'd hoped, and we were surprised by the arrival of that Mustang.
Yes. Jersey Jerk, a new acquisition from Fighter Aviation Engineering.
So, second flight only, so felt the need to get that out and onto for you to be able to witness that. And an aircraft we're likely to see a lot of through the summer season and beyond, no doubt. Gorgeous aeroplane shining in the light there.
Yes, and this is its first public outing, worth noting.
Great. And yeah, nice to be out and about with our shirt sleeves on, having spent many months staring at computer screens getting the new streaming service going. Some of that work has involved you staring at archive material, which you've enjoyed, I know.
I have. It's been quite an education looking back at those old shows and seeing the evolution in the lineup. I've been putting together a whole load of little packages that show you a few clips each of various different archive programs, and I think we've got one of those lined up now.
Troop reinforcements are needed. Royal Marine Commandos, the famous Junglies, are brought in by Sea Kings. Each can carry up to 25 fully armed men. Speed is of the essence to get the helicopters clear of the battlefield to fetch in more troops and supplies. And it all ends in an almighty firefight.
The A400M in tanker mode, with the two Tornadoes taking up the pre-contact refueling positions.
Here's a bit of fun with the 5 Tornadoes being provided by the famous 617 Dambuster Squadron from RAF Marham in Norfolk.
And welcome back. We don't know what clips you've just seen, so Andrew needs to whisper into our ear, but I had a watch through all the selections you've made, and you've found some real gems in there. The archive we're talking about is the Plains TV archive. So we started this company, or rather my dad started this company in 1989-ish, so we're 35 years old. And the archive stretches back all the way through those 35 years. So some pretty remarkable, as you can imagine, air shows through the 90s, 2000s. And even if in the last, you sort of look back 10, 15 years ago to shows that we've sadly now lost, there's some pretty unique stuff in there. So yeah, the streaming service at watch.plainstv.com is the place to go if you fancy reliving some of that aviation archive and joining us for some of the live broadcasts we have planned this season.
Yes, and that includes several shows or at least one show that we've never covered on Plains TV before. It's one that I'm particularly excited about. It's coming up in about 6 weeks' time, and that is over in Poland, Antidotum Air Show Lesno.
Yeah, pretty remarkable show, and Adam been there many times and classifies it as his favourite air show anywhere, and rightfully so. It's a pretty unique show that you won't see anything like anywhere else. I'm very pleased to say we'll be taking a live broadcast team out to Lesno in the middle of June for How do we describe this? So I was looking at last year's running order, was it? We're talking 47 items in the flying display.
47 items in a roughly 7-hour flying display, and you see a little bit of everything. Every facet of aviation, lighter than air, hot air balloons, all the way through to gliders, motor gliders, paragliders, fast jets, transports, turboprops, trainers, warbirds. You do see a little bit of everything, and they're quite famous for their combat reenactments and comedy acts and other one-off features. The other thing the show is really famous for is its night display. Now, we've seen displays in the UK that go to about 25-30 minutes after sunset. This is a proper night show that goes on until 11 o'clock at night, and it includes a lot of flares. We're going to see the likes of the C-130 and the Super Puma dumping hundreds of flares in a single go. It's quite something, and I've never seen anything that compares to Lesno's night show anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, and to try and shut him up just for a little while, we do have a little trailer video that gives you some idea of the sorts of things that we'll see at that show in June.
It's one of the fastest growing and most exciting air shows in Europe. Plains TV is thrilled to bring you live coverage of Antidotum Airshow Lesno for the very first time. The best of Europe's civilian airshow performers have come together, along with an enviable pick of military teams for this extraordinary flying display. And we'll be taking you into the middle of the action like never before, with live aerial filming over the course of the show. The Polish Air Force features strongly here, with spectacular flare-filled displays by the C-130 Hercules and the Tiger demo team. And we're also looking forward to the Lesno debut of the brand new M346 Felix solo display. Visiting from abroad, the PC-17, Swiss Super Puma, Slovenian PC-9 and a Swedish SK-60, performing at an air show for the very last time before its retirement from military service. Lesno is famous for its combat reenactments, comedy acts and other specially choreographed one-off displays, and this year's cast includes piston warbirds, classic jets and other airshow favourites such as Rich Goodwin's jet-powered Pitts. The airshow continues late into the night and concludes with a spectacular pyro display featuring the likes of the Bo 105, the Flying Dragons and the Aerosparks display team. Almost every kind of aviation is represented over the course of the roughly 7-hour flying display, from fast jets to unlimited category aerobatics, helicopters, paragliders and even hot air balloons, flying in stunning sunset conditions. Welcome to Lesno, and welcome to an airshow like no other. Well, I hope you enjoyed that little look at what is coming up in a few weeks' time at Lesno in Poland. Apologies again for the sound problem. We think we have now sorted it. I'm getting a thumbs up from Ian from behind the camera. We were trying out some new equipment today, and I think what we've learned is we need to do a bit more experimentation before we put it into service. So there is another very interesting aspect to our Lesno live broadcast, which was alluded to in that video that you just saw, and I saw Angus commenting on it in the chat as well. And that is the fact that we aren't just going to be filming from the ground. We are going to have, we expect, 2 cameras in the air as well, and they will be taking you in specific cases inside the aerobatic box and getting within just a few meters of the aircraft as they perform their displays. And we've got a little bit of a teaser of what some of that material is going to look like, which Andrew can play for you now. During our live broadcast from Antidotum Airshow Lesno, we'll be getting you closer to the action than ever before with live aerial filming from inside the displays. For 5 years, Antidotum Airshow has been working with Aerosparks Drones, the leading airshow drone specialist. This was possible only after years of intense training with real manned aircraft, initially allowing Aerosparks drones to record ground movements and operate outside the aerobatic box, but later allowing them to fly inside the display area with suitably trained and qualified display pilots. In 2024, we'll be broadcasting those views live for the first time during our Friday and Saturday live streams. Here's a taster of the sort of thing you can expect.
Hey everyone, that drone stuff I'm very excited about. So we'll have, we hope, 2 drones. So the sort of drone that you're used to seeing, nice wide-angle shots of a train travelling down a track as some presenter wanders into shot and then tells you all about it. And that one doing a little bit of dynamic stuff, moving around in the aerobatic box.
Inside the aerobatic box. But we also have an FPV drone.
Yeah, which is quite something, and that's a bit of an unknown for me in terms of what we'll see.
And that has been brought into the equation for one very specific airshow performance, and I'm not going to say what it is because I don't think the airshow organisers have announced it yet, but it's something that I have never seen before. It's one of the Lesno one-off specials, and we're going to be bringing that angle in to chase down this event as it makes its way down the runway and across the airfield and really get you a very close-up aerial view of it, literally flying in formation with the vehicles, plural, as they perform this feat.
So if you haven't understood already, we're very excited about what Lesno is going to have in store for us in June. That broadcast's coming to you via the watch.planestv.com service. So thank you if you are a subscriber. If you've been there for a long time, thank you very much. It's helping us, as you can hopefully see, expand and go and explore some interesting events overseas, and also developing the website to a point now where I think it's a very good user-friendly experience. And as I say, Chromecast and AirPlay now available, so that will all be available for you for the June show. We've got another Duxford show, of course, coming up in early June, which we'll talk about in a moment. But why not talk about this one? We can see the Catalina running up at the end of the runway there. That will be one of our first display items.
Yeah, the Catalina will be flying with the Nimrod. That will be opening our flying display programme at 2 o'clock. And we've got a couple of interesting formations coming up over the course of the programme, because after that we've got the Fury flying with the Wildcat, and the Wildcat always an aircraft that I enjoy seeing, not one that we see out and about very often from the fighter collection. Then we have a Harvard, we've got a Spitfire, the American-themed schemed Spitfire owned by George Hay. And if I turn over to page 2, we've then got Chipmunk and Beaver formation. It was due at one point to be a pair of Chipmunks, although I have heard that has dropped down to just the one Chipmunk flying with a Beaver. Then we have Solo Hurricane, and we end the programme with the Lockheed L12 Electra Junior flying with another Spitfire.
Yeah, it's going to be a lovely flying display. We've got the weather for it. Beautiful way of starting the summer season. If you're new around here and are wondering what on earth is going on, you've stumbled across us on YouTube. Hello, my name's Ian. I don't think we did that at the beginning with our fuss over microphones and new equipment that we probably shouldn't have plugged in 5 minutes before going on air. Hello, my name's Ian. I run Planes TV. Business started by my dad 35 years ago. Pleased to say Adam has joined the team this year. not just doing Plains TV stuff, but other stuff as well. But I'm hoping to dig my claws in deeper over the course of the year. We'll see. And but yeah, Adam's a wonderful host on these broadcasts. We will have, of course, Ben Donnell commentating through the main flying display, which starts at 2 o'clock. But hopefully that's a decent enough introduction. You know what on earth we're all about.
And we should probably explain what a Duxford Flying Day is, in case you're unfamiliar with this concept. This is kind of one level below an air show. Duxford does hold a couple of major air shows every year, but this is a smaller event. The crowd is much smaller. I think it's typically about 5,000 people for a Duxford Flying Day. The flying display 1 to 2 hours long rather than the 4 hours we might get in air show, and this really is a chance for aircraft and pilots that might not have displayed for a while to get back into the swing of things as the season comes along. Sometimes these events are used to train up new members of flying control committees and flying display directors, so it's quite a valuable asset for the airshow community as a whole, as well as for the spectators here, extending our airshow season by a few extra weeks back into the spring.
Absolutely, and a valuable, I mean, we're here supporting IWM with audio kit to allow Ben to carry out his commentary during the main flying display, but it's a valuable opportunity for us where the flying display is slightly more reduced than some of the larger shows we work at, so it's a bit of a chance to, in theory, test all our stuff and get ready for the bigger shows throughout the season, as long as the audio all works when you go live on air. But yeah, well, shut up about that. Should I concentrate on the good stuff? And it is going to be good stuff this afternoon. So yeah, a smaller show in the Duxford season. One of the bigger shows this year will be the June Summer Air Show, 1st, 2nd of June. Excited about that one. Lots of Red Bull, lots of C-47s, D-Day Anniversary Air Show. I think it's another one you've put together a very nice...
I have done, and we'll see some of the highlights that you can expect in that flying display as Andrew plays a little teaser for what's coming up at the start of June.
The morning of June 6th, this was the battleground. Vast squadrons of bombers and transports led the way. More than 11,000 planes spearheading the attack. Paratroopers landed in Normandy behind the coastal defenses. Landings made with timing and precision, perfected only through scores of rehearsals like this.
D-Day is marked 80 years on at the Duxford Summer Air Show 2024. One of the key commemorative events of the aviation component of Operation Overlord, the show will bring together a large collection of Dakotas from the USA and Europe for mass flypasts and parachute drops. But it's not just about the D-Day anniversary, with airshow acts flying in from across Europe. The Flying Bulls are bringing their DC-6, P-38 and B-25, and Frederick Ackery is visiting the UK with his Sabre for only the second time. Plus, there's the outstanding Rafale solo display from France.
Yes, so the D-Day Anniversary Air Show at the start of June will be our first on the new streaming platform. That platform, we will be broadcasting all of our live shows through that platform ad-free. So if you're watching on YouTube, annoyed by adverts, we do have an option for you if you feel like watching some of those subscription-only broadcasts as well. That might be one for you. That service at watch.plainstv.com. It's the one I'm going on about. Yeah, we've spent a fair amount of time preparing over the last few months. It's looking really good, actually. I haven't jumped in the chat just yet. I will do. But if that broadcast 1st, 2nd of June, of course, ad-free. It's the only place you'll be able to watch the Duxford show over on the streaming service. What we're going to cover, so it's ad-free on there, and of course it's live broadcasts throughout the summer season. We've got Air Tattoo coming up in July. The Lesno show we've covered. In September we'll be back here at Duxford for the Battle of Britain Air Show, and of course, as I say, all of our flying days and other smaller air shows will be available on there ad-free. And of course the archive. So Adam's been tackling migrating all of our archive. There's hundreds of hours of stuff there. Airshows going back 35 years. So we do have a little VT of some of the... what have we called them? What's the section on the website called? It's sort of favourites from the
archive.
Best
I
of
think
the
I
archive.
called it.
Yes. So here's a little clip of some of the archive material available on the platform.
Like the Jaguar, it also proved effective in the Gulf War against well-defended targets at long range, whilst maintaining a high serviceability rate.
Stationed at Florennes, and it's in the hands of Captain Aviator Stefan Dart, who's in the second of his 3 years as the Belgian F-16 display pilot.
I think we need to show you the wonderful Nimrod taking off, actually. Has Matt got that? So the Nimrod airborne, ready for flying display starting here in 12 minutes time. Now might be as good a time as any to hand over to Ben if it wasn't for the fact that he just put the microphone down. Oh no, I can see him on. So I think what we'll do now is go and do the jobs that we're here for, really. So Adam's hopping on camera and I'm going to be staring at computers for a little while, and of course the wonderful Ben Donnell will be guiding you through the flying display here at the VE Day Flying Day. Thanks very much for tuning in. We'll hop on again at the end of the flying. I think that's our hope, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Assuming everything's working nicely. So yeah, enjoy everybody. It's going to be a lovely afternoon of flying.
But at our VE Day Flying Day today, we pay tribute to not just Duxford's role throughout hostilities between 1939 and 1945, but also through the aircraft we're going to be seeing on display, through most of them at least, the entirety of the Allied effort during the war years. In Duxford's case, it started out as a station within Royal Air Force Fighter Command. It had already, in 1938, become home to the RAF's first operational Spitfires with number 19 Squadron, and they were still resident here when war broke out in early September 1939. Indeed, 19 was stationed both here and at Duxford Satellite Station, a little way to the west towards Royston at Foulmere, until August 1941. Far too many other Royal Air Force squadrons to mention were stationed here until Duxford changed over to American hands and became Station 357 of the US Army Air Forces. That transfer as the
American presence in the European theatre grew and grew, taking place in March 1943, though initial American elements had begun to arrive here the previous autumn. And so it was that Duxford saw out World War II as an American fighter base, home to the 78th Fighter Group, luckily with P-51 Mustangs on strength, having replaced its P-47 Thunderbolts, and the 78th Fighter Group was to be resident at Duxford until after World War II ended in the Pacific Theatre in September 1945, when the aerodrome returned to full Royal Air Force control.
And if before you end your day with us today, you'd like to find out more about all of Duxford's
roles, some of which we'll be reflecting on as the flying display takes place, well, I recommend the displays in the historic Duxford exhibition, which is located in the old state workshop behind the control tower here, the way of discovering more about life at this very famous airfield during the years of hostility.
But it's clearly broken.
so well with the air arm of the Royal Navy in the early post-war years, particularly during the Korean War. The colours of this one incorporate very distinctive yellow in the circle.
Catalina coming into the left.
Representing that prototype Fury 10. But now, in over the motorway, from the left, the start of Beaver and Flying Day, the start of the Duxford Flying season of 2014, the Consolidated Catalina and the Nimrod.
Has its origins in the era when the Hawk and Nimrod was still in service in the mid-1930s, when already there was the very likely threat of Japanese attacks on American interests in the Pacific, and the need for a new patrol bomber design for the US Navy resulted in Consolidated aircraft coming up with this. I say this, but not exactly in this form, because, as you will obviously have gathered from the fact that it's taken off from the airfield here, this aircraft is an amphibian rather than a pure flying boat. But the early Catalinas were pure flying boats. They didn't have the wheeled undercarriage. Nonetheless, it was a very effective aeroplane, and when it first appeared in patrol aircraft prototype form in March 1935, a very, very advanced one indeed. That big wing you can see, which has a 104-foot span, incorporates fuel tanks. It's therefore known as a wet wing, and that led to a considerable weight saving. It's also a very clean airframe, quite low drag, and as you can see demonstrated, the wingtip floats, rather than being fixed, are retractable. And all of that helped contribute to this aircraft's excellent performance, particularly in range terms. In fact, the patrol bomber prototype version achieved a new world distance record in excess of 3,400 miles on its maiden flight. And it was those attributes and more that saw this aircraft playing such a crucial role throughout the Second World War, particularly in the Pacific theatre and during the Battle of the Atlantic. And in the context of VE Day, as we commemorate today, in the European theatre, it's the exploits of Catalinas, of, in particular, RAF and Royal Canadian Air Force units that are most notable. Britain's survival during the Second World War depended on many factors, of course, but high among them was the ability to continue the vital supply convoys coming across the Atlantic. Incidentally, we're just about to get the Fury and the Wildcat into the air off the hard runway below. Out in mid-Atlantic, there was what became known as the U-boat gap. It was an area in which German submarines were able to do considerable damage to the supply convoys supported by Luftwaffe Focke-Wulf Condor maritime aircraft. And it was an area, crucially, that was out of range of all existing land-based platforms. 2 aircraft in particular made the difference in closing that gap. One, the Catalina, with the sort of range performance I was talking about. The other, the Consolidated Liberator, as used by Royal Air Force Coastal Command. That alongside the Liberator's role, along with the B-17 Flying Fortress, as one of the 2 main US Army Air Force's heavy bombers of World War II. And as the Hawker Nimrod begins to go through its paces overhead and the Catalina goes downwind to land, it's worth reflecting that this year marks the 80th anniversary of 2 of the greatest Catalina exploits of the war. The 2 missions that saw Catalina pilots being awarded the Victoria Cross. One of them was a Canadian, Flight Lieutenant David Hornell of number 162 Squadron. The other, a Scot, Flying Officer John Cruikshank, a member of the Royal Air Force Volunteer Reserve who was serving with number 210 Squadron. Both of them continued attacks against German U-boats in the face of enormously heavy fire. To give you an idea of what they experienced, Cruikshank himself was hit by German fire in 72 places on his body. His navigator was killed, and the aircraft was still brought home from the middle of the North Atlantic to Salem Voe in the Shetlands, a 5-hour flight that the second pilot had to conduct most of, in spite of the fact that he too was injured. Cruikshank is still alive today, the oldest surviving recipient of the Victoria Cross, aged 103. As the Catalina is brought in to land, in front of us is the beautiful form of the Hawker Nimrod. This aircraft, the result of a Royal Navy search for a faster and more capable carrier-borne fighter to replace the ageing Fairey Flycatcher. The Catalina from plain sailing there being brought into land, crewed today by the aircraft Captain John Harmsworth and the co-pilot Philip Pettit. To meet that Royal Navy requirement, Hawker came up with what started out as a private venture design. Design was sometimes dubbed the Norn or the Sea Hornet before they settled on the name Nimrod. It has its origins in the land-based Fury biplane, one of which is also airworthy here with the historic aircraft collection. But really it's a very different machine, longer span wings and, crucially for the maritime role, flotation boxes in the wings and fuselage. The procurement took a very long time indeed. The decision was taken to buy Hawker's offering after the Admiralty had deliberated and vacillated for some 4 years, almost on a par with the modern day, you might say. And remarkably, the Nimrod came into service with the Fleet Air Arm before there'd even been a chance to evaluate a proper production standard aeroplane. When they did that, they showed that the aircraft had some stability problems, although the handling was generally considered to be good. Just 92 Nimrods were produced. The first 42 were Mark 1s like this, which came into service aboard HMS Courageous in November 1931 and soon sailed to the Mediterranean. Then came the Nimrod 2 with all sorts of different improvements. They were deployed quite widely aboard carriers, but as I said, they were in service only in tiny numbers when World War II broke out in September 1939. Just 18 were on strength with the Fleet Air Arm, and the last of them was a Mark I flown by 753 Squadron of the Royal Navy on weather check flights as late as 1942. This was just the third production Mark I Nimrod. This example was embarked in HMS Glorious. It's been part of the fighter collection's strength since the early 2000s, and Stu Goldspink was flying it today, choosing, you'll note, to use the opposing runway to what we've seen in use so far today in order to make sure that the aircraft is able to angle off into wind as much as possible on landing. As you can see from the windsock on the far side of the airfield, the wind, although light, is pretty much across the airfield, gusting towards us insofar as it is gusting. And Stu there, one of the most experienced exponents of aircraft of that era, deciding that the wind favoured a landing in from the west rather than the east. For our next item, we move on with naval aircraft, and moving on from the Nimrod to two Fleet Air Arm carrier-borne fighters of later eras, and two that I don't recall us seeing in formation together. And here they are, in over the motorway, the Wildcat and the Fury. And it was the later of the two aircraft, the Fury, that was leading them in there. not an aeroplane that served in the European theatre during World War II, but the Grumman Wildcat certainly is. This is an FM2 Wildcat, and that designation indicates the fact that this aircraft was one of the majority of Wildcats in not being built by the aircraft's original designer and manufacturer, Grumman, but by the Eastern Aircraft Division of none other than General Motors. Grumman came up with a new fighter for the US Navy in the mid-1930s. It initially carried on its line of biplane fighters, but soon came the realization that a biplane was simply not fit for the new era. The aircraft was substantially redesigned to create a monoplane that first flew in 1937, and although it had been originally conceived for the US Navy, which came into operational service in anger first with our own fleet air arm of the Royal Navy. At that stage, we were deciding to give American-built aircraft different names in many cases to those that were originally bestowed on them across the Atlantic, and so this aircraft was known at the outset of its British service life as the Martlet, named after a mythical heraldic bird. Holds the distinction of being the only American-built aircraft to see active frontline service during the period of the Battle of Britain. 804 Squadron of the Fleet Air Arm replaced its Gloucester Sea Gladiators with Martlets in October 1940, based in Orkney, and using them to protect the fleet anchorage at Scapa Flow. Thus entering service before the end of October 1940, Martlets officially classed as having flown in the Battle of Britain. Really was a super little naval fighter, this. It was one of the favourite aircraft of the famed Royal Navy test pilot, Captain Eric Winkle Brown, who flew them operationally with 802 Squadron. He called this a tough, fiery, beautiful little aeroplane. He made very good use of its qualities, shooting down 2 Focke-Wulf Condor maritime attack aircraft during his service with 802 Squadron aboard HMS Audacity, before Audacity was torpedoed by a German U-boat, leaving Brown as one of the few survivors. The F-4F, or FM2 Wildcat, was the main US Navy fighter at the start of the Pacific War, but they carried on being used in the European theatre as well. Martlets accompanied Fleet Air Arm Grumman Avengers, engaged in anti-submarine strikes during the Battle of the Atlantic. They were active on D-Day, providing fighter cover to anti-submarine forces on patrol. And they later supported the Allied landings in southern France. And later in 1944, the Allied attacks on the German battleship Tirpitz. And 79 years ago, to this very day, the 5th of May 1945, Wildcat Mark 6s of the Fleet Air Arm of the Royal Navy and Grumman Avengers conducted the last airstrike of the whole war in the European theatre, attacking a German U-boat depot near Harstad in Norway. This one, as I said, an FM2 built by Eastern Aircraft in 1945. It's been part of the Fighter Collections fleet for 31 years now, based at Duxford, painted as an aircraft that was named That Old Thing, in service with the Fleet Air Arm. And as it finishes its beautiful solo display, running in once again over the motorway end, from our left is the Fury. Wonderfully rattly sounding Wright R1820 radial engine we just saw in the Wildcat was capable of producing 1350 horsepower with a power boost from water methanol injection. Well, by contrast, the Bristol Centaurus 18 radial that we see here powering the Fury gives out some 2,500 horsepower. This is an aeroplane that continued that very famous line of Hawker monoplane fighters. It started out being developed as a replacement for the RAF's Hawker Tempest 2s, one of which you can see here awaiting its display debut in one of the hangars. And it was first known as the Tempest Light Fighter, but when World War II came to an end in 1945, the RAF no longer had a requirement, not least as the new jet fighters were starting to come into service. But the Royal Navy's Fleet Air Arm was a different matter, and so development continued of the Sea Fury, which initially was felt unsuitable for operations from aircraft carriers, which rather rendered it pointless. The trials undertaken in May 1945, around the time of VE Day, by the Aeroplane and Armament Experimental Establishment at Boscombe Down, said it was unsuitable for deck operation because the aircraft had a horrible swing to the right on takeoff and insufficient rudder power to counteract it. So Hawker set about redesigning the fin and rudder. It also helped to equip the aircraft with a 5-bladed propeller. And pretty soon, the Sea Fury was on its way to being another of the greatest carrier-borne fighters ever to see service with the Royal Navy. It replaced the Supermarine Seafire as the Fleet Air Arm's main carrier-borne fighter post-war, entering service in October 1945. And some 650 examples of the definitive Sea Fury FB-11 fighter-bomber version went on to be built, serving gallantly in Korea from 3 Royal Navy aircraft carriers and 1 carrier of the Royal Canadian Navy during the war there of 1950 to 53. Gradually settling the Wildcat down onto the hard runway after a beautiful demonstration of its qualities, Brian Smith. Most famously, among the Sea Fury's exploits in Korea, was the shoot-down on the 8th of August 1952 of a communist-flown MiG-15 jet fighter by a Sea Fury. That was the only British air-to-air victory notched up during that conflict. Pretty soon, aircraft like the Supermarine Attacker and the Hawker Seahawk came along and dragged the Royal Navy's Fleet Air Arm into the jet age, but squadrons of the Royal Navy Volunteer Reserve carried on flying their Sea Furies until 1955, and non-navalised Furies were also built for the air arms of several other countries, most particularly Iraq and Pakistan. Those aircraft, of course, don't have the wing folding mechanism, and this aircraft is an ex-Iraqi Fury, designated as a Fury ISS for Iraqi single seat. The need for wing folding on carrier-borne aircraft, of course, due to the need to stow as many as possible on the very small-sized below-decks hangars on aircraft carriers, and of course to get as many as possible of them onto the deck prior to launch. Sorts of different mechanisms for that have been tried over the years, and as the Wildcat taxis in, one of the most innovative, which we don't see demonstrated here, but which was developed for the Wildcat, was a patented mechanism by Grumman whereby the wing didn't simply fold up into the air like on a lot of other carrier aircraft, but ended up folded along the side of the aeroplane. It was called the stow wing. It came in partway through Wildcat production and ended up being mechanically operated. And it really did save that mechanism a tremendous amount of space when compared with the more traditional methods, to the extent that Grumman carried on using it on other designs, and it can still be seen to this day on the E2 Hawkeye airborne early warning carrier-borne platform. But now in from the left for its final pass, the Fury. Meantime, the Wildcat returning to its parking spot. Do show your appreciation to the pilots as they pass by. There's Brian Smith, one of the most experienced warbird practitioners of them all, at the controls, I should say, of the Wildcat. He's just had a good bit of arm exercise in the cockpit of that aircraft, I can tell you, because the undercarriage retraction system involves manually winding it. And I gather it can be quite a challenge to get the Wildcat's gear up before crossing the airfield boundary here at Duxford on takeoff. But a tremendous aeroplane, and in those D-Day black and white invasion stripes, very appropriate to see it in this D-Day 80th anniversary year that we'll be commemorating at Duxford next month. The Fury, which is shortly going to be coming into land, another of the fighter aviation engineering stable of aircraft that are maintained and operated by Air Leasing. It lives here at Duxford. And bringing the Fury into land after his solo display there, Mark Levy. I think that might have been Mark's first public display in the Fury. An increasingly prominent presence on the warbird scene. The American marked Spitfire now taxiing out towards the hard runway. Be our next but one display item. and the Spitfire rolling to go off to the hold. Incidentally, if you buy one of the wing-to-wing with a Spitfire flights that Classic Wings carry out with their drag and repeats from Duxford, it may very well be that American-marked Spitfire that you fly alongside, because it's regularly brought in for those operations. A really special chance, that, to see the beautiful Supermarine fighter close-up, air-to-air. And of course there are also chances to fly from Duxford in a North American Harvard, and we saw the example currently being operated by Classic Wings active earlier, and it's just parked out in front of the tower. Well, another of the Harvards that's a regular sight at Duxford is about to go into its display. You're shortly to hear the very characteristic, often described as buzzsaw rasp, generated not by the 600 horsepower Pratt & Whitney Wasp radial engine itself, but by an acoustic effect caused by the tips of the propeller going supersonic. And this about to herald the arrival of an example of what is unquestionably one of the greatest training aircraft ever produced, and which, through training Allied pilots, was so key, along with aircraft like the Tiger Moth, which we can see some out on the grass in front of us as well, in training thousands upon thousands of Allied pilots for the 1939-45 war effort. Again, this was a design that went through a few iterations before being perfected, starting off with a rather different outline profile and a fixed as opposed to a retractable undercarriage, but then production switched to what the Americans called the AT6, the advanced trainer version, the Americans calling it Texan rather than Harvard. And the design as we know it today was born, and that design represented, running in from the left, by the Harvard 2B of CK Aviation. Well, with 600 horsepower on tap, it's a pretty potent machine, and some of its handling characteristics were quite similar to those of the frontline fighters that trainees would hopefully move on to transition to the heavier metal, the likes of the Spitfire or the Mustang, for example. nearly 15,500 Harvards or Texans or SNJs, as they were known to the US Navy, ended up being produced. Many of them by companies other than its original designer, North American, and that's the case with this one, which was built in Montreal in Canada in 1942 by the Nordine company. And it served at Dunnville in Ontario with number 6 Service Flying Training School, which was part of a remarkable organisation called the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, the BCATP. This was established when pilot training was moved to Commonwealth countries away from the UK, Canada and Rhodesia especially, in order to take those activities away from the possibility of being affected by enemy action, as would have been the case on these shores. And more than 167,000 aircrew, including in excess of 50,000 pilots, passed through the plan's facilities. This aircraft later went to the Swedish Air Force, but it's now been back in its original colours since it was restored by the Fighter Collection, its former owner and operator, in the mid-1990s, and it really is a particularly exquisite example of the type. The two post-war de Havilland Canada aeroplanes that are going to be taking our next but one slot, making their way out onto the grass as the Harvard turns finals. And I mentioned how nowadays the Harvard is still so much in demand for that advanced training role, leading pilots on to fly the single-seat fighters.
You take the first one, roll on.
And exactly that is true of the lady who's been at the controls for that lovely aerobatic display, Isabel Rutland. Because as diversionary missions, then they were assigned to the 12th Air Force for the invasion of North Africa, operating from Gibraltar. They went on to support the Allied landings on Sicily in the summer of 1943. Going on to receive Mark 8 and Mark 9 Spitfires. Shortly afterwards, the 31st Fighter Group moved to Italy and the 52nd to Corsica. They covered the Allied landings at Salerno and Anzio. They operated in close support of Allied ground forces in Italy and southern France. They flew patrol and escort missions. They went on to be assigned to the US 15th Air Force in early 1944 before converting to the North American P-51 Mustang. In addition to that, the former American volunteer manned Eagle squadrons of the RAF transferred to the US Army Air Forces after America entered the war and began to take up residence with its forces in Europe, as the 4th Fighter Group based at Debden in Essex in September 1942. It carried on flying Spitfires until March 1943. Another American flown Spitfires were photographic reconnaissance examples, flown by both the US Army Air Forces 7th and 68th Photographic Groups, A few Spitfire Mark Vs and navalised Seafires were flown by the US Navy on D-Day. But this is currently the only Spitfire active in the UK in American colours, representing those of a 31st Fighter Group machine flown by Lieutenant Robert Connor in late 1943 and early 1944 in the Italian theatre. The Spitfire that originally wore the colours that are now applied to this aeroplane was stationed near Naples in late 1943 and early 1944. It flew cover for the Allied amphibious landings at Anzio in January 1944, and after that campaign it continued to use its Spitfires, the 309th Fighter Squadron of the 31st Fighter Group, on close support, patrol and escort sorties, finally re-equipping with the P-51C model of the Mustang in March 1944. And it's very unusual indeed that the two Spitfires appearing in a Duxford Air display should represent overseas users, the Americans in the case of this aircraft, the Indians in the case of the Mark 14 with the Griffon engine that'll be closing our show today. And also nice on this VE Day, Flying Day, to have some representation of an aircraft in the markings of one flown in the Italian theatre as well, often somewhat forgotten in comparison with activities in northwest Europe. A really nice demonstration there of the Spitfire 16 from George Hay. But this show, of course, hasn't all been about the aircraft that were in service with the Allies in Europe up to and on VE Day. We've already had a pre-war fighter in the form of the Hawker Nimrod. We've had a post-war fighter in the form of the Hawker Fury. And we're now going to see two very different looking post-war products of de Havilland, specifically the de Havilland Canada company, which it's good to put in this show, I think, because they depict two very important aeroplanes that were both in development at the time World War II ended, and they help us tell this story into the early post-war years. In fact, into the years long after the early post-war period in the case of both of them, and particularly their service with the British Armed Forces for different roles. From the left then, the de Havilland Canada Chipmunk and Beaver. What we've got here are consecutive designs from the de Havilland Canada stable, the DHC-1, the Chipmunk, and the DHC-2, the Beaver. And they first took to the air in consecutive years, the Chipmunk in 1946, the Beaver in 1947. The Chipmunk, leading this pair, was conceived as a replacement for the biplane Tiger Moth elementary trainer with both the RAF and the Royal Canadian Air Force. The Beaver was designed when de Havilland, Canada, hit upon the need for a new and very, very versatile utility aeroplane that could operate as a land plane, as a float plane, or on skis. And both of these designs turned out to be highly successful in these very different fields. And there they are, braking with the Chipmunk climbing slightly to gain height for its part of this joint display. While the Beaver turns straight back in. This aircraft has the very powerful 450 horsepower Pratt & Whitney Wasp Junior radial engine, and that plus that big high lift wing give this aircraft superb short takeoff and landing characteristics. They served with the US Army, not least in Korea and in divided Berlin. But this aeroplane, in its rather unassuming way, was one of the most important British military assets of the post-war years. The British Army Air Corps took delivery of its first Beaver in 1961, and they were active in support of British Army operations right round the world. That included activities in Borneo, in the Aden Protectorate, and particularly, as the years went on, in Northern Ireland. And indeed, the Beaver was the British Army's primary airborne surveillance platform in Northern Ireland, helping avert many terrorist initiatives, that until the aircraft were replaced in 1989. But incredibly, this is still a design that's in US military service even today, with the US Naval Test Pilot School at Patuxent River, Maryland. Training would-be test pilots in low-speed handling and in glider towing, and you can still find Beavers, just as was intended for this design, on operations in quite inhospitable areas of Canada and the USA, flying on floats, and there's even a turboprop conversion of the Beaver available from Viking Air. But beyond even that, Harbour Air, one of the main surviving operators of Beavers, has developed the aircraft into an all-electric powered aeroplane. thus giving it yet another new lease of life. And the Beaver we just saw, though it might not look much like it now, is an ex-Army Air Corps aeroplane that's been restored beautifully into civilian configuration by the Aircraft Restoration Company, which operates it, often as a support aircraft for its warbirds, Spitfires in particular, on deployments further away from home than Duxford. But sometimes appearing in its own right as here as a display aircraft. The Chipmunk, meantime, which we see exiting to the west as the Beaver runs back in over the motorway. Was built not just by de Havilland in Canada, but in the UK at de Havilland's plants at Hatfield and at Harden, as well as with the Portuguese state manufacturer Ogma. Came into RAF service in 1950, served with, for example, the reserve flying training schools, the University Air Squadrons and the Air Experience flights. This Beaver, meantime, first flew after restoration here by the Aircraft Restoration Company in early 2011. It's got a pretty luxurious interior, and I gather it even incorporates a crimson finish to the crankcase to match both the colour scheme of the interior of the aircraft and the maroon elements of the external colour scheme. Starting its takeoff roll underneath the Beaver is the Hurricane. Having mentioned the surveillance missions that Army Air Corps Beavers flew during their active service, that's something the Beaver and the Chipmunk, which is coming back in again, have in common, because the station flight at RAF Gatow in Berlin, when that city was divided by the wall, operated a small number of Chipmunks ostensibly to give officers serving there continued flying practice. In reality, their role was clandestine photo reconnaissance of Warsaw-Pact units on the ground and Warsaw-Pact airfields in and just outside the Berlin control zone. They even undertook primitive forms of electronic intelligence gathering, again on Warsaw-Pact forces. As trainers, it wasn't just the RAF and, of course, the Royal Canadian Air Force that flew the Chipmunk. Several other nations did as well, and both of the other main UK flying services, the Fleet Air Arm and the Army Air Corps, had Chipmunks into the 1990s, as did the RAF. And the RAF itself still has 2 Chipmunks on its own strength, both with the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight at RAF Coningsby, where they're used as tailwheel trainers. Rolling now, our first chance to see it in a display in its Royal Indian Air Force colours, the Supermarine Spitfire 14E. Taxiing back meanwhile, Martin Overall at the controls of the Beaver. And this Chipmunk, which is based not far from here at Audley End, just down the M11 towards Stansted, owned by a group there. It's a very early surviving Chipmunk, built as far back as 1950. And it was flown today by Phil Hardisty. So that's our de Havilland Canada slot complete. We now move to the fighter that was, of course, the great workhorse of RAF Fighter Command during the Battle of Britain, the unsung hero indeed, compared with the Spitfire of the events of the summer of 1940, and one that served gallantly in so many other theatres as well, right through to the end of World War II. The one we're about to see is a very notable specimen. It's a Mark I example that served only briefly with number 501 Squadron during the Battle of Britain, being shot down after only 7 operational sorties by a Messerschmitt Bf 109 of the Luftwaffe over Kent on the 28th of September 1940. The pilot was Pilot Officer E.B. Rogers, who survived by jumping out by parachute. Well, the aircraft's remains were the subject of a beautiful rebuild by Hawker Restorations, which was completed in 2018, and today the aircraft is operated by Hurricane 501, based here at Duxford. 501 reflecting the fact that it was with 501 Squadron during the Battle of Britain that this aircraft served.
I have, but no danger of it coming in yet. And it's now over the restoration hangar. If 2 can go wide and left, yeah. And as soon as it's in 2, oh, it's going round again. Shot, which it might be very shortly, I will go and pick it up. Sue and I could do a swap, seeing as I'm going to lose the Electra into the Electra. Oh, you're on 2 already. I am. Okay.
And here it is, inbound to us from the left, the Hawker Hurricane 1. Final pass there from the Hurricane, breaking into the circuit to land. Don't forget to book your tickets for the Duxford Battle of Britain Air Show here on Saturday the 14th and Sunday the 15th of September, when you'll see many, many more Spitfires and Hurricanes than we've seen today.
Lesno and D-Day trailers a bit different on demand promo if we did some chatting at the end. Okay. Is to get the Hurricane.
Neil Oakman bringing the Hurricane 1 into land. And now we turn to our final item, which was to have seen a formation element at the start, but now it appears isn't. But it's still something of a combine of reconnaissance aircraft, and both aeroplanes which featured, if you came to Duxford over the winter, in the Spies in the Sky exhibition that was staged in the airspace hangar, tracing the history of Royal Air Force photographic reconnaissance. The aircraft taxiing out now, which is going to be getting airborne. In many ways, the father of the photographic reconnaissance Spitfires of various marks that subsequently appeared, proving, as it did in the run-up to World War II, the concept of a fast and high-flying camera-equipped platform for undertaking photographic reconnaissance missions deep into mainland Europe. But as you can see, this is a civilian rather than a military aeroplane.
Apologies for the questions, Andrew. I will stop in time.
More about it when it performs solo. To conclude our display, we're taking to the runway and shortly to roll the Lockheed 12A Electra Junior. And as it does so, the Spitfire that we're about to see traces the reconnaissance Spitfire story much further into World War II, to the advent of the Griffon as opposed to Merlin-engined examples, the Spitfire FR-14E. FR standing for Fighter Reconnaissance, and this aircraft getting its debut public airshow display in Royal Indian Air Force markings. It was in 1942 that India saw its first Spitfires, when a pair of photo reconnaissance PR Mark IV versions were ferried from the Canal Zone to form number 3 photographic reconnaissance unit. Fighter versions followed, and Spitfires of the RAF were very active in India against aircraft of the Imperial Japanese forces for a good amount of time afterwards, indeed until the end of hostilities in the Indian theatre. And then in 1945 the Indian Air Force itself began to start receiving Spitfires of its own. The first unit to receive the Supermarine type was number 8 Squadron of the Indian Air Force, and it was with that squadron that this very Mark XIV Spitfire itself served, and it's been put back into exactly those markings. The first Spitfire to appear on the British circuit, as far as I can recall, in Indian colours. And when there was conflict on India becoming independent on the 15th of August 1947, Spitfires of what was then the Royal Indian Air Force were involved in that as well. They were particularly involved in flying close air support sorties, assisting Indian ground forces, albeit not for very long, because in early December 1947, Hawker Tempests began to take over from the Spitfires, and wouldn't it be nice soon to see the Fighter Aviation Engineering Tempest, which is itself an ex-Indian Air Force aircraft, flying with the Spitfire FR-14E that we've just seen in its original Royal Indian Air Force colours, with Stu Goldspink at the controls. But now to close our show, the Lockheed 12A Electra Junior. Such an incredibly elegant and advanced design, this. All metal construction, at a time when quite a lot of equivalent aircraft in its class would have been wooden fabric. A top speed of more than 220 miles an hour and very long range, in the region of 800 miles, with only standard fuel tanks installed. No wonder then that this aircraft attracted the attention of a very notable individual who was looking to decide upon a type for potential clandestine long-range reconnaissance missions around Europe, the Australian-born Sidney Cotton. After a variety of less than successful business interests and other escapades, Cotton found himself in financial difficulties when he was recruited by the then head of the air section of our Special Intelligence Service, the SIS, Wing Commander Fred Winterbottom, to head up the flying side of a new SIS aerial reconnaissance operation. This was at a time late in the 1930s when it was clear that traditional forms of intelligence gathering around Europe would increasingly dry up. This in the run-up to impending conflict. What followed started out as a joint arrangement with the French, because both France and Britain needed up-to-date sources of aerial reconnaissance. And the choice of aeroplane fell on the Lockheed 12A. The first two Electra juniors involved in this requirement both went to the French. This one was sold to the Secret Intelligence Service and shipped to the UK in the spring of 1939. It was given the registration Golf Alpha Foxtrot Tango Lima, which, as you can see, this aircraft wears again now. And it was converted for the reconnaissance role with the addition of various camera positions inside the fuselage and small camera ports in the wing leading edges. In many ways, it was quite an advanced fit for its day. But nonetheless, there was a bit of good old-fashioned improvisation required when fitting this aircraft out. Cotton's assistant photographer, to use a somewhat euphemistic term, one Patricia Martin, devised a couple of modifications which would come in very handy. It had a teardrop window on the port side of the cockpit through which you could point another handheld camera, and she also devised a system of pipework which would divert hot air from the engine exhausts across the lens of the starboard camera mounted in the aircraft's belly, so the lens wouldn't fog up at higher altitudes. It went on to be flown operationally by Sidney Cotton himself and his co-pilot, a Canadian, Flying Officer Bob Niven. And Niven's logbooks, which survive, unlike Cotton's, reveal a lot of the details of the secret missions that this aircraft flew. In mid-1939, it went out to Malta, and from there flew reconnaissance sorties covering key points in the Italian Empire as far afield as Somaliland, or Italian Somaliland to give it its full title at the time, and Libya, like naval bases and aerodromes. It then flew a 6-hour, 10-minute flight from its base at Heston in London to the Wilhelmshaven area of Germany. On that occasion, it captured imagery of Luftwaffe airfields and the East Frisian Islands. Again, out and back from Heston in late August 1939, just a few days before war ended up being declared, this very aeroplane went to photograph naval objectives in the North German coastal areas, and it's known to have flown on several occasions to Berlin's famous Tempelhof Airport on business, in inverted commas, connected with Cotton's cover story, which was relating to a film production company. on several of these, it seemed likely that no photography was undertaken, but it did have one other very secret mission to perform. Its last visit to Berlin, which was connected with an unsuccessful attempt to persuade the Reichsmarschall Hermann Goering to fly to Britain for peace talks, which he would have done aboard this Lockheed. When war broke out, obviously it could no longer range into hostile German airspace, but this aircraft flew to Ireland's west coast to check on reports that German U-boats had been refuelling there, and to check on the presence of certain types of defences in the Dutch and Belgian naval ports. When it was transferred to the RAF, the aircraft ended up meeting its end in a Luftwaffe parachute mine attack on its base at Heston during the Battle of Britain in September 1940. It then went back to the USA for repairs. It would remain on the other side of the Atlantic until 2022, when it was bought by Fighter Aviation Engineering. It was taken to Sywell for restoration by Air Leasing. That was concluded last year with a first flight in late March 2023. It's been on the airshow circuit ever since, and it is an absolute jewel in the crown of aircraft preservation in this country. An aeroplane with a quite incredible history, and which has been subject to a beautiful restoration. And it's very interesting in this attractive skyscape we have today to have been able to see how our impression of the colour scheme of the aircraft differs depending on the light that's thrown on it at any particular time. Unfortunately, there are no period colour images of how this aircraft actually looked when it was in service with the Secret Intelligence Service. This aeroplane based here at Duxford, and we'll be seeing it at several of our other flying events and air shows over the course of the rest of this season. The only Lockheed 12 flying in Britain, but there are several others with owners in mainland Europe. And into land today, the concluding act of our flying programme this afternoon, the Lockheed 12A, flown today by Gabriel Barton and Mark Levy. And with that incredibly historic aeroplane, we bring things to a close. It's been a real pleasure to start the season off here in such delightful fashion as this, and as I said, there's much more to come. Don't miss our D-Day 80 Duxford Summer Air Show on Saturday the 1st and Sunday the 2nd of June. Tickets selling very, very fast. Advance ticket only, admission of course. For details of that and all the other flying and other events here at Duxford, go to the website iwm.org.uk to find out more and to book. Thank you to the entire team who've put this show on today, from the IWM and from all of the aircraft operators, both in terms of the air and the ground crews who've made it all possible. And my special thanks to the team from Plains TV who've been broadcasting live here today and who have assisted with the audio feed for the public address. So thank you very much indeed for that, chaps. And above all, thank you to all of you for coming to support IWM Duxford and our VE Day Flying Day for 2024. I look forward to being back with you in just a few weeks' time for the IWM Duxford Summer Air Show. Of course, the site here remains open tonight until 6 o'clock, but whatever you've got planned for the rest of the day and this bank holiday weekend, enjoy it, have a safe journey home, and from me, Ben Dunnell, goodbye.
Well, that that brings us to the end of the flying display here at Duxford, although it does look like there's a little bit more flying activity to come, because we've just seen what appears to be the crewing in of that new Mustang Jersey Jerk out here making its first public appearance, only its second post-restoration flight when it flew in here earlier this afternoon. And we don't know for certain what is going to happen, but it does look like they might be preparing to start up and take off.
I'm going by Phil, crouching down with a camera and looking expectant at the Mustang. I don't know. We don't know what's happening, do we? I dare say Ben doesn't tie that.
Oh, there it goes.
So presumably heading back to Sywell?
I would assume so. Nice of them to make this post-restoration sortie coincide with an event day here. And speaking of an event day, what an enjoyable show it's been, and that last Spitfire display stands out as being particularly memorable for me.
Absolutely, I've been buried in the trailer fixing technical snags throughout the day, so I've missed some of it, but the glimpses I've caught have been of glorious backdrops to very nice displays. Yeah, Spitfire in particular standing out. We had a super chat earlier for the early Spitfire display as well, the American Spitfire, which went down really well on the stream as well. And I hope you've been enjoying it. And those of you on the new streaming service, I hope that's all worked technically well, and you've enjoyed all but the short intermission we had during the middle of the flying. But yeah, lovely day, gorgeous weather. Long may that continue through the rest of the display season, which is going to be a very busy one for us. We've got the IWM Duxford Summer Air Show, June 1st and 2nd. That will be available on our streaming service at watch.plainstv.com. And we'll do and we have a live preview of that on the Friday as well. That will be free to view on YouTube to get everybody excited about what's going to be a pretty action-packed summer air show at Duxford. Yeah, and we're not quite sure what we're going to see on that Friday, but there is some talk floating around on various versions of the D-Day Squadron tour schedule that there might be some practice parachute drops over the course of that day, and this will be a logical location for that to occur, so maybe we'll see some round canopy jumps out of the back of Dakotas. Here comes the L12 Electra Junior. And a nice juxtaposition there between two of the more recent acquisitions from Fighter Aviation Engineering. The Electra returned to flight relatively recently and made its airshow debut at Duxford just last summer. Jersey Jerk, this is the first time that the public have been able to see it, so nice to see those two aircraft together. So we will stay with the action here, the main flying display having finished, but I dare say we're about to see a Mustang take off, so it'd be a shame to leave you before that happened. And once that does happen, we'll be we're finishing this stream. It will be available to you after the broadcast. I'll let you enjoy the sound of the Mustang for the time being.
There goes Jersey Jerk. We were talking a moment ago about the Duxford Summer Air Show, and it's probably worth talking about some of the other aircraft that we're going to be seeing there, because it's not just about D-Day. We've also got the Flying Bulls, who will be here with the DC-6, the P-38 and the B-25. We don't see them at UK air shows very often, especially not the DC-6. It's been a fair few years since that was last here. And then another very keenly awaited participant, the French Air and Space Force, the Armée de l'Air et de l'Espace, with the Rafale C solo display in a brand new paint scheme, which is being officially unveiled tomorrow, I believe.
How interesting.
But I have seen a picture of it, and it's quite a nice one.
Will it make it any easier to chase that aeroplane around the sky as it carries out the most extraordinary fast jet demonstration? It is a very hard one to film as a telephoto camera operator.
It is a tricky one. It's a slippery little aircraft. It's got by far the fastest roll rate of any of the current fighters, and a really fast instantaneous turn rate as well. You know, you come round nose on towards you and then just whack straight to the knife edge and pull off to the side. It's almost too fast to keep up with. And while the Mustang is right down the far end of the taxiway and probably a couple of minutes away from taking off, now is probably a good time to have a look at that little promotional video that we prepared to prime you for what to expect from that summer air show. So for the next 90 seconds or so, let's have a look at what's coming up at the start of June.
The morning of June 6th, this was the battleground. Vast squadrons of bombers and transports led the way. More than 11,000 planes spearheading the attack. Paratroopers landed in Normandy behind the coastal defenses. Landings made with timing and precision, perfected only through scores of rehearsals like this.
D-Day is marked 80 years on at the Duxford Summer Air Show 2024. One of the key commemorative events of the aviation component of Operation Overlord, the show will bring together a large collection of Dakotas from the USA and Europe for mass flypasts and parachute drops. But it's not just about the D-Day anniversary, with airshow acts flying in from across Europe. The Flying Bulls are bringing their PC-6, P-38 and B-25, and Frederick Ackery is visiting the UK with his Sabre for only the second time. Plus, there's the outstanding Rafale solo display from France. So that is what to expect from the Duxford Summer Air Show in June, but in the meantime, let's look back out towards the runway where Jersey Jerk has lined up. We'll be seeing her starting her takeoff roll any second now.
Well, a really nice way to end a really nice day. Lovely to see a new aircraft on the circuit. Glorious scheme as well in that dark sky.
Yeah.
Dark, threatening sky, actually. It's the sort of sky you stare at and think, am I about to get wet? But I think we're okay. Touch wood. Yeah, so the Summer Air Show, very much looking forward to that on the streaming service. If you head over to the calendar at watch.planestv.com, you can tap the little button that will give you a notification of when we do go live. You can add it to your own calendar and other such fun. But yeah, general message is that if you'd like to join us for all of our Summer Air Shows, subscribe to that service at watch.planestv.com. We'll have the June Summer Air Show here at Duxford. Middle of the month we will have Lesno.
Yes, now I do want to sort of talk about this again. I know I've talked about it a lot, but I am so excited because it is my favourite air show in the world. It's like no other air show that I've ever been to, like no other air show that we've covered before. This is a show that starts about 3 in the afternoon and continues until almost midnight. A quite remarkable event that showcases every single facet of aviation, and we've got a little clip lined up that gives you an idea of what to expect. It's one of the fastest growing and most exciting air shows in Europe. Plains TV is thrilled to bring you live coverage of Antidotum Airshow Lesno for the very first time. The best of Europe's civilian airshow performers have come together, along with an enviable pick of military teams for this extraordinary flying display. And we'll be taking you into the middle of the action like never before, with live aerial filming over the course of the show. The Polish Air Force features strongly here, with spectacular flare-filled displays by the C-130 Hercules and the Tiger demo team. And we're also looking forward to the Lesno debut of the brand new M346 Belix solo display. Visiting from abroad, the PC-17, Swiss Super Puma, Slovenian PC-9 and a Swedish SK-60, performing at an airshow for the very last time before its retirement from military service. Lesno is famous for its combat reenactments, comedy acts and other specially choreographed one-off displays, and this year's cast includes piston warbirds, classic jets and other airshow favourites such as Rich Goodwin's jet-powered Pitts. The airshow continues late into the night and concludes with a spectacular pyro display featuring the likes of the Bo 105, the Flying Dragons and the Aerosparks display team. Almost every kind of aviation is represented over the course of the roughly 7-hour flying display, from fast jets to unlimited category aerobatics, helicopters, paragliders and even hot air balloons, flying in stunning sunset conditions. Welcome to Lesno, and welcome to an airshow like no other.
That's going to be exciting. Middle of June, really exciting. Really excited to take a team out there to live broadcast it. We'll have live drone footage incorporated in that production. It's a long old display, 47 items, and join us, be with us. We will hopefully do a preview show, free to view, but the main show weekend, Friday, Saturday, will go out on the streaming service. What was next? What we
were going to talk about the streaming service and some of the other things that are available there.
That's true. So Plains TV's existed for, the business used to be called Aviation Action, but started 35 years ago, and that means we've been covering air shows for all of that time. So yes, we're very excited to be bringing you new and interesting live broadcasts, and I'm very grateful to all of those subscribers who've allowed us to go out and do that. But of course, those subscribers do get access to our back catalogue as well. So there's some really interesting stuff in there. Some aircraft we don't see, air shows we don't see. There's probably the odd air arm we don't see anymore. It's an extraordinary breadth of content on that platform. And I know
the Russians, for a start, for air arms we don't see anymore.
Yeah.
I was astonished when I was going through it and editing the sort of clip that you're about to see. As I was going through footage from particularly the late 90s, how it seemed like every village fete in Britain seemed to have multiple Russian military aerobatic teams flying at it.
Yeah, it's quite something. Yeah, some of those 90s shows, I saw someone in the chat earlier saying they've been enjoying catching up on some of the Woodford shows. You know, talk about airfields that no longer exist. So Andrew's going to pick a random clip that Adam has prepared of some of the archive content that's available to subscribers of the watch.plainstv.com service.
From the right, the Antonov AN-124 Condor. So a nice selection there from that archive. I hope if you have just got your new login details for the new service, we've shifted
the website to that service just last week, and you've been able to get access there. I hope you've been enjoying exploring it, and viewing on TV is a lot easier now. Use Chromecast, use AirPlay, and once you're subscribed, you can also download the apps to view. Well, we're excited about the season ahead. We've got some exciting opportunities. July, of course, Air Tattoo. September, we'll be back here for the Battle of Britain Air Show. Lots of flying days in between, and the odd other bit and piece that will...
a few things that haven't been firmed up yet.
Yes, yes. So if you're looking at the calendar on the service, it's maybe not an entire thing yet. It will grow as we progress through the season. Still early in the year, of course. Yeah, so thank you very much for joining us. Hope you've enjoyed the show, and we'll see you at the earliest on the 1st of July, 1st of June, 2nd of June, for the Duxford Summer Air Show. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon.
Good evening.